In my experience, anytime I speak to a group of about this size, there's going to be 5 people at the end that'll come up and say I should be a stand-up comic. There's going to be 5 people at the end that come up and say I should be a preacher. And there's going to be 5 people who will just be sound asleep throughout the whole event. But people want to know, what is the book about? What is Use All The Crayons about? And I always tell them it's about 200 pages. It used to be 150, but the book did so well. It was 501 tips on how to be colorful and enjoy your life and be happy, and around 33 essays. But it did so well that I ended up doing another 1,000 items. So now the new book has 1,001 items and 57 essays. And it deals with all the big questions in life, like why are we here? Where do we go when we die? What is the meaning of life? And then it asks questions only that are important to me. Questions like, if fans of the Grateful Dead are called deadheads, what does that make those of us who revere the book Moby Dick? And that's as close to a dirty joke as I'm going to get. I heard you went through it last night, so I'll try and keep it clean. I try and do something each and every day to ensure that parking at my funeral will be a real bitch. You know, if you meet somebody at the grocery store, I always try and be nice to the same person over and over again, so that they'll say, Rodell died. I'll forgive him the $20 he owes me. I'm going to go to his funeral. He seemed like a nice guy. Because you want a crowd at your funeral. You want people to be complaining about the traffic at your funeral. One of the things I see, and so many good people that I know go to church every day, every week, and pray for God to change the world. And then they spend the rest of the week ignoring all the God-given powers they have to change the world. I mean, we can change the world. We can change the world. You want to change the world? Write someone you love a letter. Not an email or a text. Sit down and write them an actual letter. When was the last time you got something in the mail that made you happy? I mean, you saw the envelope, a Christmas card or something like that. Do you remember when getting the mail used to be a special thing? When you were a kid, you'd go out and get the mail. Now it's terrible. And that's why I'm here, really, because I wrote that letter to Natty at the National Church Residences to thank her for all the care they did for my mother. I didn't say I'm also a speaker. I didn't put my resume in there. I just wrote them a letter saying, thanks for caring for my mother. And then here I am. So it's just great. But if you write a letter to an old teacher, someone like that, that letter will be tucked in a Bible and it's handed down from generation to generation. If somebody's made a difference in your life, write them a letter. It takes 5 minutes and it will change the world. It's a wonderful thing to do. I tell people, be so at peace with the world, the only thing you have left to get off your chest are your nipples. This one is also related to my wife. And I'm a lucky man. We've been married 21 years. And they've been very happy years. But this is related exactly to my wife, how she perceives herself and how I perceive myself. And I made it universal. Women look into mirrors and see flaws no one else can detect. Isn't that true? Many women are very harsh on themselves. Men look into those same mirrors and see perfection no one else can detect. I said we've been married 21 years, and she's a Lutheran church organist, and I'm a writer who insists on working above a nearby tavern. So we've had some tough times. I'll never forget the time that we almost divorced. I showed up at church one morning drunk, and I was walking down the aisle singing "Just a Closer Walk with Thee." And I wasn't wearing any pants. And I think the only thing that saved our marriage was I was in the wrong church. Now that's the kind of story you can get away with if you tell colorful stories. Like, I swear if somebody called the Latro police and said, there's a man in a Speedo robbing the bank, they'd say, that's just Rodell being colorful again, don't worry about it. Like my grandfather, I think of my grandfather so much when I think about life and death, because he lived to be 97 years old. And his was quite interesting the last few years. I asked him when he was 87, I said, Papa, we were driving around Du Bois, Pennsylvania at the time. He was still driving. And everybody said, wow, that's amazing. An 87-year-old man could still drive. I said, but everybody in Du Bois knew to be off the road between 10 and 12 every day of the week. Made it easy for him. But I said, are you ever afraid of dying? Because he told me that he was going to another funeral of another friend. He'd buried all his friends, and he punched the steering wheel. I'll never forget it. He goes, hell no. He goes, I pray every morning I do not wake up. I'm so sick of living. He goes, I've just used all my life up. 10 years later, he was still alive, and he now was living with my mother in the South Hills. And my family has a very dark sense of humor. And he said, you know, if it wasn't such a shame on the family, and he made a slashing motion across his wrist like that. And my mom said, I wouldn't be ashamed. Because they'd been living together for about 2 years. And then about 2 weeks later, in the middle of the night, he went into the bathroom, filled up the tub, and made a slashing motion across his wrist with something sharper than a finger. And he tried to kill himself. And he failed. He took that mortal step, and he was just horrified that he couldn't kill himself, that he didn't. And I'll never forget the next day, we cleaned it all up. We took him to the hospital, but he had a do not resuscitate order, so they couldn't even bandage him up. You know, they just kind of left it as it was. And I remember him getting in the car, and I said, are you going to put your seatbelt on? And he said, ha, ha. He was done wearing seatbelts at 97. But we were sitting there after we'd had this horrific day, and the human body can deal with emotion, but it essentially needs to function the way it always functions. It needed food. We'd had this terrible day, and we'd gone about 10 hours without eating. My mom says, I'm famished. Go get some sushi. So I go to get some sushi across the street, and my grandfather was a butcher in Du Bois. He'd been a butcher his whole life. Never had any sushi. And so he's sitting there, and he sits up on his shoulder, on his elbows. He said, what is that you're eating? I said, it's sushi. He goes, let me try a bite of that. Now, I don't know what I was expecting to happen. I didn't know whether I was going to expect him to jump out of bed and say, thank God I'm alive, this sushi's fantastic. But I thought it did seem like an electric moment. So I'm sitting there watching him eat the sushi. I said, well, what do you think? He said, I wouldn't hit a dog in the ass with this. But there in my two close family members, we had all the colors of our lives. If we wanted to, if we could, we would color our lives only in beautiful colors, wouldn't we? But we all have some dark colors in our lives. You can't avoid it. And again, it's how you deal with those dark colors. I want to ask you some questions. Now, you don't have to raise your hands or anything like that, but is there anybody here who is still upset that the Patriots came back and won the last Super Bowl? That was a tough one. That was a tough one. Is there anybody here that had trouble sleeping last night? I've told people that I said that I had part of my thyroid removed about 2 months ago. Well, it was about 6 weeks ago now. They'd found a potato-sized lump in my throat. And I like describing it as potato-sized because they said tennis ball, but potato-sized sounds more dramatic, doesn't it? And it's my lump. I can describe it any way I want. I told my one friend, he said, is it Idaho? He was trying to decide which kind of potato it was. I said, I don't know. I just wanted it out of there. But now I say, whenever I even try and sound sweet things, I feel like I'm talking like Dirty Harry now. And I'm having trouble sleeping with this, so that's been a new development. Is there anybody here that has like a knee that's sore or something that's bothering them, a little backache or something? Yeah. Is there anybody here that's estranged from a loved one? Is there anybody here that has a little dog that's sick or a cat? That's hard, isn't it? I mean, we put so much love in it, and you feel a little silly when you respond like that. You think, I love this dog so much, but that's actually how you feel about the animal, and that's a genuine love. Is there anybody here that has a child that's sick? You talk about ripping your heart out. when you know a child that's sick. It may be somebody in your neighborhood even like that. That just, or these people that are going through addiction right now. It's just terrible. Makes you so sad. Is there anybody in here that woke up this morning and thought, I can't go on another day? Because there's a lot of people that feel that way. You know, and we see people, I don't know how they deal with these things like that. I always say that I know one person that felt like that. His name was Robin Williams. You know, one day Robin Williams woke up and said, I can't go on another day. The world is too tough. I don't feel like going on any further. I'm going to kill myself. Robin Williams. He brought so much joy to so many people. And one day there was no one there for him. If anybody in this room would have been there for Robin Williams, you'd have done whatever you could to stop him, say, you are loved, you are necessary. But there's people we see in our lives that we kind of don't give that same sort of attention to. I always say that other books will say that life is wonderful. If you get a nice diet, you'll feel better. If you wear the right clothes, you'll look better. I say wrong, wrong, wrong. Life is hard. The only way to get through it is if we armor ourselves with love, laughter, and one another. We really need that. I sign all my books the same way. I sign them. Never forget for even a single instant how many happy colors your lives are adding to the lives of those you love. And remember, together we can all brighten the whole world. Everybody in this room can do that. And I'm going to do something now. I always end these things like this. I'm going to tell you how my book ends. It ends with number 1001. Learn the fine art of knowing precisely when to quit. Thank you. Anybody have any questions? Does anybody want to know where that bar is that I work above? Here.
Smile.
Hey, and I'm Mary.
Okay, do you have a favorite color?
Good way to start the day.
Oh, thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Well, I really enjoy having the opportunity. There we go.
If you have a choice, right?
That's
The next one I need is the best choice. The big windows don't open up.